Well, hello, everyone. It's John Lockland. I'm the director of Forum for Democracy International. Welcome to this week's forum. Peter Lavelle from Moscow, my co-host, joins me. Jeremy Nell will be with us in a few minutes. We're immensely pleased and honored to have the political commentator and journalist Diego Sequera join us from Caracas. Diego, it's Groundhog Day, isn't it? More than 6 years ago, under Trump 1, the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, together with the then National Security Advisor John Bolton, attempted to overthrow the Venezuelan regime and the presidency of Nicolas Maduro. And this dragged on for a year or so, a couple of years, with the fake president that everybody recognized, including, by the way, the European Union countries. Mm-hmm. And then it all fizzled out, didn't it, one morning? The coup never materialized and it was all forgotten about. But here we are 6 years later, warships apparently in the Caribbean, Russian troop movements, or at least freight deliveries. Diego, is Venezuela about to be attacked?
I think, well, you know, when you said Groundhog Day, I also reminded the famous Yogi Berra quote, it's deja vu all over again.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I mean, I think it's going even further than, it goes even beyond the Trump years. This has been going on for, you can say, a quarter of a century already, you know, and with different iterations and manifestations and tactics, but the strategy overall, it's basically the same. And regarding the question, I think that we're already under attack in the sense of economically speaking, diplomatically speaking, but especially economically speaking. We've been under attack for a bit more than a decade. And the main issue now is that it's threatening to go full kinetic. That's like the biggest difference of all regarding all the previous misadventures, be it Republican or Democrat, and already Venezuelan citizens have been killed. And not only Venezuelan already, also you have people from Colombia and from Trinidad, that also fishermen or smugglers for that matter, who smuggle anything. We're talking about very porous maritime borders, and they could smuggle whatever they paid for to smuggle. And but so it's becoming more of a Caribbean basin situation, a more regional one, of course, being Venezuela the flashpoint for many reasons. Of course, we can go through all of them if you like.
Well, Diego, John already mentioned the misadventure of 2019. What is the difference? How is Venezuela different, or maybe it's not, from 2019 to 2025? And why do you think the Trump people, specifically Marco Rubio, think they will succeed this time?
Yes, one difference regarding 2019 with the whole Guaido madness is that back then there was an actual real and pretty frequent enthusiasm from some people supporting the Guaido idea back then. People from the opposition, or just people fed up with the situation that felt persuaded by the false promise they were offering back then. And until suddenly, like is usually the case, it just didn't work out. They didn't deliver the goods. Nothing happened. And so a new wave of frustration and depression ensued in a lot of people who actually, something that undermined it deeply, and I think in a far more significant way, the credibility of most of the opposition spectrum. It had also important consequences domestically, because this was like the breaking point in which many of the opposition factions basically realized two things, which are very important. They were losing with sanctions in an economic sense and so forth, and they were also losing their own political capital because of, getting involved in this kind of extremist neo-Cornish bets with no return for them, no benefit for them. So many of these politicians did some soul searching and basically joined back the fray, and they are actually into electoral politics. They're actually into debating. They recognize the Venezuelan government. They also condemn the sanctions. Many of them are already sanctioned, by the way, from the opposition. Okay. And so that's a key difference, because this time there's no actual enthusiasm in Main Street. I mean, there's no one is actually, you can see two things mostly. or either they are absolutely skeptical about it and think nothing's going to happen, and so they go about their own business, because this is not the first time we've been under so much pressure. People are actually about their lives. If you walk, I work, like I always say, in a very crowded and bustling area of Caracas, and it's a very good benchmark to see what's actually going on. And nothing is happening. Everyone's mostly focused on getting the money for holidays, which is basically sacred here in Venezuela for many reasons. And you do have, of course, on social media, you do have pro-invasion enthusiasts, but most of these people are diaspora. Most of these people are well-off people living in Madrid, in Bogota,
Miami.
Of course. So they're from these places, and they are not going through the hardships. They didn't walk through the Darien Gap into the U.S. They didn't went through the TPS program. They didn't. They flew to whichever this place, and they had their own mechanisms to just arrive and have a decent life, which is
well, Diego. If you over the last few weeks, it's been amplified almost to the point of being comical. That Maduro is a narco-terrorist. I thought he was just a communist. I mean, what's going on right now? I mean, he's suddenly a narco-terrorist 15 minutes ago here. I mean, what is the reception in your circle of friends and what you can see on social media that, okay, maybe there are people that don't like Maduro, and maybe for very good reasons, okay? But do they dislike him because he's a narco-terrorist?
Not at all. I mean, there are many reasons. And I do have friends within the opposition in Venezuela that don't support Maduro. They don't like Chavismo. They never liked Chavismo or became disenfranchised at some point, which is also pretty understandable in a way. And but yeah, that's not the narco thing. It's not a reason. And everybody, I think most of the people see through that. They know this is not about drug trafficking. This is not about security. And only, the Maria Corina faction will try. Maria Corina Machado, our recent
Nobel Peace Prize, yes.
Will actually follow that. And they also know it's not true. I mean, like back when we had your episode on Crosstalk, Peter, I think that we're just in a point that we can just settle and say this has never been a matter of truth. No one actually cares about the truth. This is all about procedures and end games, of course, and quite clear objectives which are unchanged in a quarter of a century. One more time, it's the same.
But the lack of truth was striking in the Juan Guaido business, because the National Assembly said he was the president according to Article 233, but Article 233 absolutely didn't say that. It said that in the case of a vacancy, the presidency devolves on the vice president, not on the president of the National Assembly. And in this case now, as you've said, Diego, there's no truth at all. By the way, narco-terrorism is not only an oxymoron, it's a contradiction in terms. There isn't. If you supply drugs to someone, that's not an act of terror, for goodness sake. It may be very corrosive of a society, but it's not an act of terrorism. And anyway, I think the narco-terrorism thing is just, Max Blumenthal said this to Glenn Deason earlier, it's just Ronald Reagan's war on drugs and George Bush's war on terror joined together, and then come in and hey presto, Trump comes up with a new label. But what you're saying, Diego, is absolutely fascinating. It's that there isn't now any of the domestic support which there might have been 6 years ago. So that means that if we are contemplating a real military threat, and again, I ask you, do you think there is one? What you've just said in your earlier answer implies that such an operation would be even more difficult than it might have been when John Bolton was seen with a piece of paper talking about, if I remember correctly, 50,000 troops or something. Go ahead, Diego.
I'm gonna share this with you. I believe that something was actually going to happen back in last Friday. I mean, you really had the feeling. I don't have any, hard evidence of this. It's just gut feeling, and also watching what was the dynamics around the country, I really felt something was going to happen that day, but something changed course. Something happened, and the best measure for this was Marco Rubio's tweet scolding the Miami Herald for the report they were saying, and they were talking about they were going to attack military facilities that enable the drug industry here, which is of course it's BS. But I did feel that something was actually going to happen, and I think, and this is also speculation, but I think that the two possible options. Maybe Rubio got too greedy and leaked himself, and he was the one who leaked to the Wall Street Journal and Miami Herald, stating that they were going to attack military facilities, or some liberal inside intelligence community basically leaked or pushed back some way or another, and they actually basically burned the first bank of objectives they might have. So this was like a big spoiler. And of course, I'm speculating, like I said, but it really felt that way, and it doesn't feel that way now. That doesn't mean, of course, that there's the risk of, especially airstrikes. I think that's the most plausible option.
Yeah, I mean, the situation that we're in right now is the famous, I guess, political slur against Donald Trump is taco. Trump always chickens out. Okay.
Yeah.
The reason why I say this is because, well, the United States and Iran were involved in negotiations, which I felt relatively optimistic about. I got fooled, like so many other people. And then Trump ordered the bombing of Iran. Also, we had the Istanbul process ending the conflict in Ukraine. When the day before they were supposed to meet, they had the spider web attack against Russia's nuclear triad.
Yes.
I mean, I'm obviously give credence to your sense there, but I'm always worried that there's more deceit involved than they want to show. And of course, Marco Rubio doesn't want anyone to know the game plan. They want to surprise us. I would suggest a possible false flag, a predicate for, or now
they actually
have to go. And also, it's one of these things. I mean, political discourse is so cheapened these days. How do you go? He's a narco terrorist, and how do you back down? How do you say, okay, we can live with a narco terrorist? I mean, it doesn't work that way. You see what I'm saying? And then it creates the momentum of itself. Okay, and Marco Rubio wants to be the emperor of the Western Hemisphere, okay, which will get him elected president. He'll never be president of the United. He's too short, okay. But and also just to wrap up is that John started. We've seen this before.
Yeah.
I mean, multiple times. The great architect of the first one just died yesterday, Dick Cheney. So I worry about there's a momentum that's going on. What I find really interesting, what you said, is that the opposition is not unified like it was in 2019. That's an important takeaway for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something you said, Peter, which is also important. Yeah, they're shaping the atmosphere as well, the psychological atmosphere. So it could also be just that, but still, I think there was something else. Another reason why I thought about that is, and I sort of it as a very ominous sign, actually, was Trump saying there was no attack planned already, just like in Iran, just like day before Iran, I thought this is bad, But and at the same time, what you also say, which also brings back to John's question, is basically they are putting themselves in a sort of catch-22 situation in that sense, because if they pull back now, they lose a lot of credibility, right? If they go forward, a lot of things are going to happen which are being immensely counterproductive. Another element, which by the way was covered by Bloomberg that day, it's how swift the WTI was going up, and when in a matter of minutes, with the whole speculation of Venezuela being attacked, and many people also think that this kind of attacks would also bring the Brent, as correcting the rest of the markers to around 20 to 30%. And that's going to be a major blowback for the States and for Europe, by the way. So that's another layer of contradictions here that also operating at the same time. And you probably know, people are around these things, but many insiders will tell you the energy market wants stability.
Yes,
exactly.
And they've been thriving for that.
Everybody should know it's not the price of oil that worries people. It's the stability of supply. That's what people look at. And speaking of which, you better be careful on how you fiddle around with Venezuelan oil, because American refineries are designed to refine. It's very heavy oil. Okay. If you disrupt that supply through a conflict and all that, and then what is it Exxon Mobil that's involved there? Maybe Chevron. I don't remember the company.
Chevron in Venezuela.
Yeah, okay. Well, you're going to be biting the hand that feeds you. The more you look at this, and I remember asking you on my program, is this I look at it as some kind of hemispheric re-engineering, because the American empire is getting very brittle. It has so many alliance commitments that it just simply cannot keep when you have the rising global South, you have BRICS and these other things here. I think that people like Marco Rubio, which will personally benefit from for certain, is that we need to recolonize the Western Hemisphere. And ever since Trump's come back into power, remember he was talking about William McKinley. Donald Trump, how do you know anything about William McKinley? No, because he was one of the great imperialists of American empire. And he was focused on the Western Hemisphere. And it seems to me, in the minds of these people, Venezuela, Colombia, Nicaragua, and the prize is Cuba.
Yeah, and the prize is Cuba, like I also told you in your program, which is, there's a domino, a very crappy version of domino.
Crappy version of it.
Domino effect, and the game theory going on, which is very, very lame. Above all things, it doesn't actually consider all the variables. But they're thinking that if Venezuela being the strongest link of the troika of tyranny, to use one more time Bolton's parlance, Cuba will fall immediately, and Nicaragua right after that, and which is not. There's so many misconceptions. They already keep saying that the Venezuelan what keeps the Venezuelan government together are like some Cuban spooks. That's one of the most infantile misconceptions you can find about what's going on here. And another thing, which is going forward with your question, with your comment, I read the other day, which is it's part of this one more time weird parlance of neocons and post-neocons or whatever. Project 2025 calls this re-hemisphering.
Re-hemisphere, okay.
Yeah, that's their concept, which it's a joke. It tells itself, because it's pretty obvious. And going back to the current Prince of Darkness, which is Marco Rubio, of course. What I'm talking about, bad Catholic. He talks about in all his literature, which includes many articles, very, very clever written articles, and his legislative body, he talks about reshoring, and bringing the industry and capitals back into the Western Hemisphere in order to solve the supply chains challenge, and also to recapitalize, because most of the corporate America or corporate US basically are like, it's globalizing the cash, and that's actually works more to the benefit of players like China currently. So that's basically the end of neoliberalism in that sense, as we know it, because their plan is to bring it all together within this hemispheric wall.
And a good example of that is El Salvador will be the prison system for the hemisphere. Okay,
I think it's going to be the whole Central America, actually.
What I'm saying is that there'll be a division of labor. Okay, And it's under the capital will be Miami, not Washington D.C. And it's fascinating when you look at the diasporas that they have assembled in Miami. I mean, you can look at Miami as basically a mafia environment for all of these different groups that will be supported as they re-hemisphere. I love that. That's a great phrase. I don't like the how it would be impacted, but I like the term.
Yeah, it's a good term. You remind me also, have you ever read Joan Didion's classic about Miami? I mean, she talks about this spell among the Cuban community back then. She's talking about the 80s, the Cuban and the Nicaraguans back then. And now you have, of course, the Venezuelans, which have never been too far from Miami. There's no actual bourgeoisie to talk about here in Caracas. You have like a Miami class, at least for the last 50 years. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, I have a lot of contentions with many of the left-wing topics here because I don't see an actual bourgeoisie ever to be created here in even in Latin America. Maybe on the rural aspect, because it's a class by itself and it works actually, and it's not as parasitic as the city dwellers in this case. But that Miami state of mind, yes, it's part of this whole thing. And yeah, and the division of labor here, it's important also in the sense that they're damning one more time the global south to just be a basic supplier of course, raw materials, and most importantly, well, drugs, of course, and cheap labor.
And cheap labor.
I mean,
and a policy of denying Chinese access, to some extent Russian, which is totally overblown. But that this also is a focusing on, because the Chinese will build bridges and ports, and the Americans don't. I don't know if you saw it. It was Tony Blinken. When the Chinese were opening up, I don't remember the country, a modern rail system. Tony Blinken was very proud to send a few old trolleys from the 1960s, okay? Because the United States doesn't do that. They don't, nation building is not a bad thing if you do it the right way, I suppose. But that is not what the U.S. Can provide. It wants to extract. It doesn't want to develop.
That's the basic uninterrupted rationale regarding Venezuela and their own decisions of sovereignty and how to manage how we manage our resources. It's as basic as that, but there's a new layer here. And I was thinking also, you mentioned McKinsey, but this is actually more like Spikeman kind of things. This is Rimland theory actually of containment here, but with like a Gloria Stefan twist to keep up the Miami spirit among all these things. But it also has another element here, which is also something that clearly the quote unquote conservatives in power, and I highlight the quotes here because it's a mixed bag of counter elite in this sense, in a structural sense. But you have the tech bros here, which with all this AI industry and so forth, which is hugely demanding precisely of energy, and in a very undevelopmental way. I mean, so they have to also to hoard all these resources, and that's also why you have to understand the relationship with what's going on with Nigeria. Mind you that Venezuela and Nigeria they have lots of commonalities. One of them, of course, both are originally petrostates. That's the classic. I mean, and also pretty third world-ish, and I'm not saying this in a demeaning way, it's just a fact, but also state and government are basically the same, are usually the same in this case, because basically the main means of wealth production, it's oil, which is run by the state. And there are also two or more things. I mean, and yeah, the Christian concern is as folks as the narco terrorism from Venezuela. It's the same kind of trope, but there are other obvious reasons. One of them is China's presence in Nigeria, China's presence in Venezuela, of course, the same thing. And then you have the Sahel, because he's focusing on Hausas, ethnically speaking. In Niger, which is right next to it, it's mostly Hausa, Muslim Hausa. There's no, and this sectarian violence it's actually being delivered by actual narco terrorists who bring the drugs up to Europe. throughout the Sahel, which is like this turbo capitalist version. I mean, it also reminded me of, what's the name of this guy? Niels Gilman. He's a historian. I think he lives in the Netherlands, by the way. It's a very clever guy, but he talks, like 10 years ago, he was talking about the double insurgency, which is basically after privatization during the end of history years and so forth, and all the destitution and everything that now Europe is seeing so blatantly, right? Two kind of insurgencies coincided. One from above, which is the corporate one, the corporate takeover one we already know about, but then there's a criminal one below, let's call it the middle class, that's been completely destroyed during this process. And they actually overlap in many ways and senses in these kind of things. So you cannot think about this hybrid ISIS, narco, Muslim, Islam gangsta kind of things that which main purpose is to bring drugs up to Europe from the white collar people that would turn those merchandises into capital. And those capitalists, by the way, are very close to Rubio and all the people here. Because if Venezuela was actually a narco state, it would have been a partner of the United States instead of a foe, instead of an enemy. I think I think I got too far, but that's kind of like,
But you placed, Diego.
You're big on theory.
You placed the change, which you've speculated about. I know it's only your gut feeling, but you placed it, I think you said, on Friday.
Yeah.
Do you link it at all to we could only call a humiliation of Trump by the Chinese President Xi Jinping? That meeting occurred. What day was that meeting? It was about then, wasn't it? It was last week.
Yes.
And you've mentioned China's presence in Venezuela. Do you see a link there? Did TACO happen because of? Was that the Chinese takeaway? If I can mix my culinary metaphors.
Maybe. I'm not.
Yeah, that's a fascinating question.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
I think I'll give my opinion next week, John. I'll have to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think all these things are just synchronized in some way or another, unwillfully. That's the thing. I mean, all these variables of very lively politics and nations that are actually quite active right now, including Venezuela in that sense, by the way. I think it discombobulates the cold calculations of the strategists, quote unquote, and I one more time highlight these quotes here, from the current administration in the US. They think that like the world's going to be stunned and waiting for these things just to happen, like they might be like Iraq,
Or maybe they just think, I'm going to file John's question in the back of my mind, but maybe the USS Gerald Ford is steaming ahead, and they've already had flights over into airspace, and they're killing all these smugglers.
Or fishermen.
That's enough to scare Maduro to run away. Maybe they believe that.
No, they certainly do. And that's funny. That's pretty funny because one more time, if you link it to 2019, 2020, they were so convinced that it was going to happen. Because of two things. One of them was the opposition, the Venezuelan opposition back then, which is the Maria Corina faction, by the way. Maria Corina, Leopoldo Lopez, extreme faction. They were like guaranteeing, no, this is just a matter of a small shove and it all happens.
It's
and they actually
always that way. Always that way.
It's always not only
just
that.
a few more sanctions and it's done. Yeah. Right.
Exactly. And the coup attempt that didn't reach the status of coup, actually. It was more like a public disorder kind of thing in 30th of May 2019, which actually it's called the Plantel coup here because it was basically on a exit of the highway near air base, and there was this crate of plantains there, which no one understood why it's there. So Venezuelans call it el golpe de los plátanos, because what was that doing there? But what I'm saying, back at that moment, and this is also written, Bolton wrote about this, and I think it's part of why he got so, now he's into trouble with the feds. But he said he was in contact with the defense minister, the head of the Supreme Court in Venezuela, and probably it was true. But the thing is that they were basically duped. They were duped all this, SIGINT and all this, NSA crap and the CIA and all these highly technical things. And it was a basic lie that fooled them to believe this. One of the oldest human tactics ever. They were fooled by the Venezuelan actors and saying, no, for sure. And that's how it actually fizzled out. And they burned a huge clandestine structure.
Yeah, but the Trump administration may feel emboldened because the dirty war against the government of Damascus succeeded.
Totally.
Okay,
Absolutely.
and because when I look at serious people reporting on Venezuela and the region, is that you come across the term Maduro is coup proof, because the military is respected, the military is taken care of, because what we saw in Syria, who can blame a military official? I have to feed my family. Okay, you give me no choice. Okay, and that's why one of the reasons why Syria fell like a house of cards. And it's often commented that the Maduro administration has looked after the interests, maybe at the expense of the general population. I don't know. Okay, but they've seen how and we saw this, infiltration of Hezbollah and the attempted buying off of Mossad agents, buying off uraniums and stuff. They have a printing machine. They can generate cash. Okay, is that it wasn't effective in 2019. Again, comparison to now, is there anything different? Can you buy the military?
Absolutely. You can always buy somewhere, anywhere.
Okay, good. Yeah, exactly.
There's always a trade. There's always the possibility of a trade. Let's be more responsible on how I phrase this. But yeah, there's always someone you can buy. Sadly, it's a tragedy, but that's as human as it gets in that matter. But mind you something, Peter. Back in 2020, this is an official number. Venezuelan inflation was around 130,000%. That's artificial. That's not an organic thing. That happens because of many reasons, especially foreign ones. But of course, it also could do with mismanagement and whatever. We also they exploited all our flaws and weaknesses all this time. Of course, that's part of the manual. But the economy after that, it has been tamed. Now, we're now in positive numbers, macroeconomically speaking, because the salary thing, the value of salary, the value of our national currency is still a problem. And that's the main and only issue now, economically speaking. But on a macroeconomic level, for example, the last quarterly, I think it was near to 8% of the internal raw production product. I don't know the English concept for that.
Gross domestic product.
Gross domestic product. Thank you. That's it. It grew up significantly at a cost. Of course, there's no credit actually here for now. There are a lot of things. There are a lot of constraints, and everything has to be done through the private sector, which also brings their own liabilities in that sense. But that's the way also Venezuela was able to circumvent the sanction regime, the sanctions program. That's the way and also at the same time, at the pari passu, like they say in economic science, diversifying the economy as far as it possibly can be done given the current situation. And I think that helped a lot. And that also prevents one of the similarities with the Syrian collapse. And of course, the Syrian collapse is also like a dream for the maximum pressure promoters, because it's not necessarily occupation, at least for the whole country, but collapse. And that's actually what they're also expecting here, because if one thing is actually going on, and there's an immediate effect of all this build up in the Caribbean, it's inflation. One more time, it's the price of currency daily. That's the main problem here right now, and it's having an impact because of this. So someone is also aware of this and is betting one more time to the possibility in order to collapse, or some sort of breakdown and some internal uprising to ensue regime change.
One of the theories, that's being floated is that, which I find to the almost lunacy, is that the troops that are being assembled in this flotilla in the Caribbean, they could take over the oil fields.
Yeah, that's a new one. Yeah, that's a recent one. Yeah, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's...
Peter, just before Diego, just before you answer, Peter, I wanted to come back on your comparison, Peter, with Syria, because I think you raised it because you're saying that in DC or wherever they're taking these decisions, they imagine that Venezuela will be like Syria. But surely the differences with the Syrian case are very numerous and absolutely decisive. First of all, Assad fell after, what was it, more than 10 years of civil war, a very severe civil war, started in 2011. He went, was it earlier this year? So that was more than 10 years.
End of last year, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that was more than 10 years. Secondly, you have very major regional actors, above all, of course, Israel, but also Turkey, acting against him. And thirdly, but there may be more than three things in the list, you actually had America occupying part of Syrian territory and therefore also being able to get its oar in. You don't have any of those. You don't have any of those factors in Venezuela. You don't have a civil war. You don't have a regional power on the American side in the South American continent, and you obviously don't have American presence, physical presence anyway, south of let's say south of the Gulf of America, as we now call it.
Well, John, you're focusing on the differences, and I don't disagree with you. But we all agree there is a commonality: is that you can buy people. Okay. Yeah. That's all. And the reason why I brought it up is that this was believed to have been attempted in 2019, actually even over the last 20 years. Okay. My point is they're not giving up on that strategy. But the differences between Venezuela and Syria, I could add 10 more differences.
Exactly.
So the point is that greed always plays a role. To what level we can discuss.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, Diego, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Actually, it was good to address that. Actually, remind me of something. I don't know if you saw the news. I think you did. Last week, at some point, they were trying to get it to our president, a personal pilot.
Yeah.
The Air Force general, by the way.
They worked on him for a long time, apparently.
Yes, exactly. And actually, he gave a last nice response because he said, "We Venezuelans are not cut with the same cloth. We're not traitors." He said that, which is also nice PR for us Venezuelans in that sense. But they're trying to get there, and there are even more commonalities in the way they tried to, back in those days, a decade ago, try to push Venezuela to become a Syria. They were using the same tactics. Actually, the outlet I work with, that I founded with other people, was inspired and precisely analyzing those models and how similar they were as they were going on here. Even in 2014, February 2014, we were going through our first very high voltage hybrid uprising at the same time that Maidan. And those kind of synchronicities are not just coincidence, And actually 10 years before with the Orange Revolution, it was the same here. There was this attempt of Guarimba, which is the way we call this color-coded attempts. It was a very basic one back then, but it was at the same time as the Orange Revolution. So this kind of synchronicities these are not only, a matter of coincidence. This is policy. And so the same things happen with Syria in that sense. And I also would add something, and I don't want to be petty about this, but I think it also has a reason. I think also Presidente Maduro takes a different kind of decisions. It's not persuaded by also other regional actors like Assad did at some point, sadly. He felt he was going to be part of the club again with all this, the Gulf people and what for. They were fooling him, of course. But of course, it was also a desperate situation, I might think. I'm not judging it, it would be quite mean and unfair to do that. We're just analyzing it, right? So back to the point of Venezuela and trying to, I'm going to bring this digression. I'm going to bring another quote, which is, I think it's also how useless the approach is. But given the lack of political tokens, I think this is another aspect here that goes beyond Rubio, by the way. We can go back to Rubio because it's unavoidable back in a second, but there was no major win in China with China. There was no major win in Gaza. There was no major win with Iran. There was no major win with Russia, Ukraine, nothing. And so you could think about the Michael Ledeen quote, the very famous, infamous Michael Ledeen quote. It was sometimes you have to go and get a little country and push it around and remind them who's your boss.
A splendid little war.
Exactly, that's it. And that's precisely, I think that was part, not the main, but part of the rationale and why we're going to focus now on.
It seems to me, I think we talked about it in my program. I don't want, this may sound, sophomoric, but I mean, Trump's looking for a win.
Exactly, but it's as basic as that. I mean, I do agree that's one of the layers, of course, and that's how actually Rubio is playing him like a fiddle. In that precisely because of that, because such a basic reason, and I'm even positive that Trump could settle with something halfway, not all the way as
but Rubio. It'll be a win, Mr. President. That's all he wants to hear.
Exactly.
That's basically all he wants to. I mean, look at his so-called second ceasefire in Gaza. How's that going? How's that going?
That's horrible. I mean,
you're absolutely right. Meeting in Budapest called off because I personally believe that Marco Rubio lied.
Of course.
Hey, we're going to meet in Budapest. That's all being arranged. You just have to have a ceasefire. And no, that's not what we agreed to.
Yeah, I mean, Rubio is calling the shots here.
Diego, do you think? I mean, this to all of you guys. I mean, is it more dangerous that it's so farcical? All of this,
I think
because you see what I mean, John. I mean, I don't see. Dick Cheney died, and I was just doing a podcast with George Samueli, and we talked about how step by step, methodically, he created his the environment. He manipulated the media. Of course, it was filled of lies, but that was a sophisticated operation compared to what we have right now.
I think that's a very good point.
The more farcical it is, the more dangerous it is.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the amount of vainness of this. It's proportional to its dangerous feat. I mean, look at something here. Who's actually paying now during government shutdown? Who's paying the military salaries? According to who's actually? What kind of overhaul is going on against that backdrop? Actually going on, and it's a very primary one. It looks like like the Mellons and the Morgans and the DuPont all over again, taking over. As we're back in the Gilded Age in that sense. The new robber barons are just taking over, and I think they're making the best out of it.
The house of Elon Musk, the house of we're going back to it. We're going back to it.
Yeah, that's the most dangerous, the house of Thiel, I think, the most dangerous one of this of all of this because he's the most insane one. And also has Ellison and Thiel, I think, are the most with the widest reach, I guess. But this is going on while the showdown is here, and it's not going to be according to what Trump is saying. Guns are blazing in Nigeria soon enough.
Guns are blazing.
So it has to do with that, and of course, Rubio is playing everything. I mean, Rubio knows his time might be at any time it could be over. He knows. Regarding Trump's attention span. This could shift at any moment. So being him like the most talented, the most knowledgeable of state, other than the guy of budget
because I think that he's looked at like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and all that, and he's focusing his attention. This is my own theory. He's focusing his attention on Marco Rubio because, he speaks Spanish. Apparently, he must know what he's talking about, and he can deliver me wins.
I think there are two elements there. First, yes, and the other thing is Rubio maneuvering knows you can't underestimate this guy in that sense. He knows every nook and cranny of his federal state. He knows how it works. and he knows the human of this environment. He knows it, and he knows how to play that. That's why, regarding Ukraine, he's maneuvering with Lindsey Graham, and regarding Gaza, he's maneuvering with Netanyahu. And regarding Venezuela, and in these three cases, he basically has pushed away all the special envoys. And regarding Venezuela, he pushed away Granel, and he's operating with his cronies from southern Florida. So, but it's Rubio.
And Marco Rubio knows about the drug trade because he grew up in a house where a drug dealer lived. Okay,
yeah,
he knows about drugs too.
Exactly, he knows about drugs, and he knows a lot about drugs. That's true. And I mean, there are even further details, and he knows a lot also about Exxon, about getting some Exxon payments for him. You know, that's another thing, and this is an extra layer of this, because Chevron is interested in just keep working with Venezuela. Exxon left in 2007 because they didn't want to comply with the final stage of nationalization. So they actually sued Venezuela, on international settlements. And by the way, Carlos Vecchio, the fake ambassador to the U.S. from the Guaidó government, was Exxon's lawyer.
That's right.
I mean, Jesus Christ! I mean, this is so obscene in that sense. You know, it's so vain and so frivolous. You know, how actually all of this is working, and how godless. I'm sorry, I want to add this to this, because that's another thing. You know, there's this poet from Nicaragua, of all places, called Rubén Darío, which is like one of the most important poets in Spanish. He's like the father of Spanish modernism. He has an ode to Roosevelt, which is a wonderful, it has been well translated into English. And he enumerates all the powerful Whitmanian stuff of the industry and the power of Teddy Roosevelt and so on. And he said, yes, you got all of that. We got this, but you lack one important thing. You don't have God with yourselves. And I think that also that kind of, that there's a philosophical element to all this as well. I mean, and also the way, I was looking for the way, you know how they call, according to the legal office of the Department of War, how they call all this smuggler, fishermen, whatever, on the Caribbean? They call it unprivileged belligerents. That's the definition they're using in order to not give any sort of, legal identification or whatever, or procedure.
Well, we're in a bad place when you ask your Justice Department, give us a legal rationale for murder, okay? And this is a growing trend with American administrations. We're rapidly running out of time. Diego, the United States has not been very nice to the hemisphere and the people over the centuries here. If there is, and I'm going to again, forgive me, everyone, if there's kinetic action against Venezuela by the United States, how do you think the South American general will react to it?
They're underestimating Latin American nationalism.
Exactly.
It goes beyond Chavismo, and certainly it's not a left-wing thing. It goes way beyond that. It goes to our forefathers. It goes to the first years of independence, where actually neither Simón Bolívar or Manuel Belgrano in Argentina, anywhere, they never thought about a balkanized continent. They thought about one place. And there are already pushback in that sense. Places like Brazil, Colombia, already saying it, Mexico. I mean, big players here are already saying it. And I think, and they're on a grassroots level, it's even more intense and dynamic the way that people react. And also, President Maduro, like 3 weeks ago, mentioned that many military from many Latin American countries sent a private message to him saying, if they hit you, they hit all of us. They're underestimating this effect that has been psychically coming back throughout the centuries, one more time and once and again. And I don't think, that's a good part of this. Of course, there's another component, which is a tragic one, but Marco Rubio tried to create a coalition of the willing regarding Venezuela. And of course, he relied on El Salvador, Argentina, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, I mean, the places they own, basically,
Yeah.
But you never heard of it anymore. Why is that? Why precisely is that going on? Because it didn't succeed in that sense. And all of these unsuccessful avenues create a vacuum that's going to be filled with something else. I'm not optimistic in that sense, because I'm not happy about my country being attacked and a regional war happening after that, or regional reshaping with all the massive consequence that could happen with this. But something new will come from this, because that's also of the essence of South America, historically speaking. I know I'm going full jingoistic here to some extent, but I have to acknowledge that this also exists in this kind of situation, especially if you push it. If you push someone to the corner, just like an animal we are, we're going to defend ourselves tooth and nail, and that's also going to happen if it gets to happen. I leave that contention there because maybe this doesn't go further. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Depends on what's going on specifically with Rubio. Because another element, when at some point the attacks were intensifying against Venezuelan, suddenly they started attacking Colombia.
Yeah.
They diffused the buildup.
Well, Diego, another theory that's being floated around the last 36 hours is this could be a hemispheric, kinetic action hitting Venezuela, Colombia, even Nicaragua. Yeah. And again, you have to be kind of an American to really understand the obsession with Cuba. Okay, it's a demonstration. So it's not regime change. It is going after a narco network in the hemisphere. Boom, 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 boom. I don't know what impact that's going to have. Okay, and the test will be, well, there'll still be illicit drugs flowing into the United States. I mean, I don't think it's going to do that.
And migrant waves. I mean, this.
Oh yeah.
I mean, precisely one of the main electoral promises. It would be. Well,
it could be a rush for the American border. The real caravans.
Exactly, that's a possibility as well. I mean, and of course, they also helped the first one. The people leaving Venezuela. It was a natural response, but those numbers, which I disputed, 7 million, I think it's below. It's still scandalously high. Was actually overstimulated by all this.
Diego, Lindsey Graham. Some people call him Lady Graham. He was on Fox News with Sean Hannity, not a very sharp guy, and they were joking. I guess this was last weekend. That Venezuela could be the 51st state. Now, when people in Venezuela, I'm sure you all heard that. What is the reaction to that?
No, I don't think many people know who Lindsey Graham actually is. If I walk out through the streets,
they're better off.
Yeah, of course they are. But if I ask the question,
lucky them.
Yeah, exactly. But if I ask the question, I'm going to get wrecked by most of the people because of how. Maybe there's some dude that's going to say it's wonderful, but most of the people will say, "Are you crazy about this?" I'm going to get, I might get a punch or something, Especially someone like him. I mean, talk about this is also, now that you say so, this is a new chicken hawk hour, This old chicken hawk work.
Yeah, but I liked what you said about how the hemisphere, Latin America. I mean, people talk about, and again, this is just propaganda. This is left wing, it's communist, and it's so stale, it's so boring. I would say these movements are about human dignity.
Absolutely. Exactly. Not only that, the coordinates now are above and below. There's no left and right here, And from my point of view, I come from the far left. Now I have more conservative positions on regarding.
But every time I talk to a far left person, I'm a conservative, but I don't disagree with you. I guess we'll have to talk for a couple more hours to disagree.
And I don't consider myself left wing anymore. You know what taught me that? Precisely all these years and what we've gone through. I mean, there's not enough. I do agree on some aspects of the economy and the role of the state, and especially the public goods. But all the defragmentation and all this weird, deconstructionism and all that madness, I don't share it at all. I mean, I value tradition. I'm a God-fearing person, and most of the people here are. And also they defend family above many of them.
Exactly.
And that's basically.
I'm very glad you asked that question, Peter, about the region, because I wanted to ask it as well. And it really ties up, actually, Diego, with what you said right at the beginning. There seems to be far more solidity, far more robustness in this situation now. So for Venezuela than there was in 2019, and maybe even for the whole Latin American continent. In other words, the robustness that you described specifically in Venezuela extends way beyond its borders, and that, I suppose, must give us some cause for hope.
Yes, I think it doesn't link up enough with the leaderships. I mean, talk about lukewarm people think about Lula in that sense, but not the common Brazilian, if you ask me. Same with Colombia, although Petro has done different. He has been quite candid and vocal about things which I'm extremely thankful, regardless of his environmentalist gibberish, But I think that's also there, and if it's not there yet, it's going to be there.
It will create it. It will create absolutely.
Yeah. Exactly. Because after all, it's been cropping up, hasn't it, from time to time, all over the place. In Bolivia, and now, as you say, in Colombia, obviously, in a rather ambiguous way, in Brazil, Venezuela, etc., etc., etc.
In Mexico here,
and Mexico, even Mexico. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mexico now, it's one of the most interesting cases, and Sheinbaum has been so gracefully playing the U.S. in a very, very intelligent way, and that's pretty.
Mexico is so lucky to have such a gifted politician. Very gifted.
I agree. I do agree with you, Peter. I mean, so this is a very different moment, and so this also tells you how wrongful the analysis to set up the strategy actually is. One more time. So it's a Groundhog Day all over again. To just play with
yeah, but if indeed, having marched his troops up to the top of the hill, Trump marches them back down again, then the credibility really is just completely out of the window. I mean, you mentioned Taco. Trump always chickens out, Peter, which I hadn't heard until now, which is a fabulous a fabulous analytical tool, let's say, of American foreign policy.
Yeah, that's
but if as Diego has suggested, that there will indeed be a back down, as you say, my God, what a mess! What a mess!
Well, what a mess from also the domestic implications for Trump, because he is so desperate for a win.
Yes.
And I hate to. I mean, I'm not a part of the MAGA movement. I'm an observer. They'll have to really sell a hard win. Will be very difficult for them to sell, even if there is a military conflict, because there's going to be a lot of veterans who say, "Yeah, I saw this in Iraq. I saw this in Afghanistan. Maybe I saw this in Vietnam." A win would have to be so. Maduro would have to go to the tarmac, put his hands out, cuff me, take me to Miami. That would be the win that Trump wants. He's not going to get that. So his base will be furious if he goes in. They'll be furious if it's a screw up. Okay. Exactly. I mean, even domestically, this is a very fragile thing to sell. They're selling it about the Monroe Doctrine and all that. Most MAGA people have no idea what the Monroe Doctrine is.
Yeah, I think I do agree. This is as nihilistic as it gets. There's no Monroe Doctrine here. There's no Roosevelt Corollary here. There's nothing of that sort here. Yeah. And one more thing about what you were saying, Peter. If this gets kinetic, and in the hypothetical case that they actually occupy some oil fields or whatever, let's imagine it goes that far. Who are the guys from the invading party that's going to get killed? Who are they? What are they? Where do they belong to? What are the values they actually promoted, defended, and shared, and believed in as a voter, as a constituency? Where do they come from?
Well, and they're going to be people say, so we're fighting for oil? Like, it's always about oil. Yeah, why are you sending young brown men, black men to fight for someone else's oil? I mean, the chances of this going sideways are about 98%.
Yeah,
I agree. That's right.
Regardless of the direction it takes.
Okay, good. Well, listen, we've got to the end of the hour. Diego, my God, it's been fascinating listening to you. I'm really grateful to you. It's been superb. Let's hope that your hunches are right. I think they are.
I hope.
Let's hope that they are. Diego Sequera from Caracas, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for everyone to watching. Thanks to everyone for watching. See you same time next week. All the best. Bye. Bye.
See you soon. All the best. God bless.